capability of the organization, which is an asset of the organization. If we can manage processes, it's like managing people or like managing products. It still is a profession in its own right.
So we are continuing our journey to learn and understand business process management from Legend. It's a great pleasure for us to have in our today's talk with Legend, Mr. Roger Burlton. Roger is the founder of Process Renewal Group and a member of BP Trends Advisory Board. He is recognized as a global leader for his no-nonsense insights and pioneering contribution in business process management since 1991, being the first in the world to run a diverse series of BPM seminar starting that year. Roger has conceived and chaired over 40 high-profile BPM conferences in North and South America, Europe, Middle East, and Australia. Roger's highly acclaimed book, Business Process Management, Profiting from Process, is regarded as the reference book for process professionals who want to conduct business architecture planning, process architecture initiatives, process renewal projects, as well as those who wish to entrench process governance across the organization. Thank you so much, Mr. Roger Burlton, for giving us your time and opportunity to learn and understand and discuss business process management from you.
Thank you, Amit. It's my pleasure to be talking to you today.
So, Roger, to start with our talk today, the very first question is about understanding business process management from your perspective. How do you define business process management?
My definition of business process management is very much the M in the BPM. So many people talk about process management, but really what they're doing is their M is modeling, as opposed to actually management. And so my perspective is very much as a business process is a capability of the organization, which is an asset of the organization. If we can manage processes, it's like managing people or like managing products. It still is a profession in its own right, but that means we have to look at those processes from the point of view of the outsiders. Never an inside-out view, but always an outside-in view. So if we find we have customers who are placing orders and receiving goods and paying us money, then that interface to the outside world for us is really important. So I think those same customers couldn't care less about how we do things internally, but we have to. They care about what they receive and whether or not they got what they were expecting and so on. But that means our processes have to work. So already what that says to me is a business process starts with an external interaction and ends with an external interaction. And how we do it internally is just something we can play with, adjust, and modify. Customers shouldn't notice.
So when we are talking about BPM, as you explained, it is about looking at outside in managing business. Organizations are looking towards the growth, and for that, they are talking a lot in terms of the innovation. Many innovation techniques, many innovation practices are planned in the organizations. Where do you see the role of business process management for innovation?
Well, I do think it's really important, and you know, it's interesting. We've been talking about innovation for decades, and there's a lot of people trying to find little tricks, but I think it's just good management. If we come back to what I just said before, if somebody clicks on a website and ultimately receives a product from us, and when we kept well informed along the way, good communication with our customers all along the way, then we should start to be able to get innovative by finding different ways of interfacing with them and interacting with them, removing unnecessary steps. So even though that sounds very traditional, there are many ways to innovate in terms of opening the door with some new technologies, for example, rethinking how we do things from a business point of view, relaxing, constraining rules and things such as that. But also I think that one of the main ways I like to recommend to the people I work with is that go outside your industry, look at another industry and see if there's a pattern that sort of applies to us. So, I mean, the classic patterns now of things like Airbnb and uh, people like Uber, if you really look at that, you'll find a pattern. And the pattern is that I can run a business without my own assets. I can run a business by connecting the supplier with the customer. I can sort of intermediate that business and run it a different way. But that pattern can apply in so many different things. I saw a very interesting one here in Canada recently, where my daughter, who has a small dog and travels quite a bit, when she travels, the dog can't always go everywhere. So she just goes online to a site called Rover. And with Rover, you can connect the pet with a pet sitter for the night. But if you look at it, it's exactly the same pattern as Uber or Airbnb. And so looking outside, trying to find those ideas and getting rid of the constraints that stop you from thinking about doing things. I think there's a lot of good ideas out there that we can adopt, even though it's in a different industry.
Oh. Rather, when an organization is looking outside for the solution, and as you are suggesting, look at the other industry, most of the ideas are coming in terms of the digitization, which is also in the C-suites, they are discussing about digitization. So an organization who's planning for their digital journey, or they have already started their journey for the digitization, how does business process management can help them?
Well, I actually believe I actually teach a class that says business process management for digital, and the issue is that a lot of people think we just grab the technology. It's a really good idea. We'll build an app. We'll put up a different thing on the website, and the technology will look after all of that for us. But we need business processes even more with digital, because now what we're doing is we're taking so many things that we used to do internally, and we're putting that in the hands of the user or the customer. And they have to navigate our process now. And if there isn't a process for them to be able to navigate, it's going to come crashing down. They won't know what to do. There will not be good connectivity. And so a process connects the work. And digital is just a way of interfacing into that work. And we have to be even more defined, more precise. We have to be able to figure out what are all the exceptions and variations, which in the past a human might have done and made up for that. But now we have to be more specific and make sure we can test every single one of those scenarios. So I think the process is even more important, because otherwise, another critical aspect of this, otherwise we won't be able to manage the data. And so much of the time, when we talk about process, all we're really doing is moving information around. And so if a customer is dealing with an app that we have put out there for them, they may be entering information about themselves. They're going to be actually putting up a lot of data, but we have to pick that data up, and we have to complement or supplement that data, which then has to be available back to that customer. So our data integrity has to be there. And without a good process, I cannot be sure that the right data is being moved in the right way. I cannot be sure that I don't have redundancy. And if once I've collected the data in a digital process, it should be the only source of collecting that data. So getting integrity on the data, making sure we're tracking, making sure we're able to tell people where they are in the overall process, that digital needs process. And the other thing that we're working with a couple of clients right now who are now saying, yeah, digital is one thing, but omni-channel is the next thing. And so therefore, if I start out on your website and I have a little bit of difficulty, maybe a chatbot will show up and say, can I help you? Maybe that's an AI-based chatbot, or maybe it's a connection to a person. But then what I might want to be able to do is, I'm going to maybe leave that. Maybe I do want to go and talk to a person in the call center. And after I talk to the person in the call center, and this is one continuous experience, after I've done that, maybe I want to be able to go in and pick something up at a store. And so this idea of physical channels, electronic channels, different ways of dealing with humans, is omni-channel, not multi-channel, but omni-channel, one experience across multiple channels. That's where digital is going. And it's there for a lot of people, but I think that, you cannot connect those dots if you don't have a process to show you how they connect. So I think it's even more important.
So business process management requires a lot of commitment. It looks to us when you're talking about innovation, or you're looking for the digitization, as you said, outside in view. So that level of commitment is required. Do you think this is business process management is limited to a particular size of an organization, only for large organization, or you see the applicability in the small organization too?
Well, this is the one of the dilemmas we find with business process management. I think large organizations desperately need it more than anything else, because the work gets chunked in different places and for different people. And so, like I had an experience very, very recently, just this last week, where we're looking at an organization, and they said, well, yes, but in order to go beyond this step in the process, we have to get a legal opinion. And so we said, well, okay, that's interesting. So he said, so we send it out to the legal department, who then hire an external lawyer to look at it. And then we wait until we get an opinion back. Because for the people doing the legal review, it's not a priority for them, just one of many legal reviews that they have to do. But for the people in the process is now stopped. And so large organizations that have more of these places to send things and receive things from suffer more. And so it's harder for them, it's more necessary for them. And you can probably make the case, though, to get that done. In small organizations, if you've got an organization of like 100 people, probably everybody knows everybody else, and they can just go over and ask for a legal opinion. And so it's really more part of their normal flow. It's when size happens that it becomes even more important. However, I do recommend, even to small organizations, it's going to be much easier to do it now when you're small, and it's going to be much easier to scale if you know what the end-to-end processes are. It's when there's some magic point there where we lose that intimacy as an organization. But I guess what I'm really saying is I think everybody really can benefit from it. Large organizations have to do it because customers will not be patient anymore. They'll leave. They won't wait.
So, Roger, many organizations we have seen, large or small, we have seen the organizations who have been successful, they had the process management systems in place. We have also witnessed many organizations who failed, but at one particular time, they were really a very big, a good organization with a lot of systems in the place. So what makes an organization successful and failed at the same time when they do have the process management? What is your experience?
Yeah, I think, again, this is a well-documented challenge, right? That as you become more successful, it becomes harder for you to be as innovative or nimble or easy to change as when you were smaller. And Clayton Christensen, in his famous book, The Innovator's Dilemma, I'm sure is written over 20 years ago now, where he documented when something changes in an industry, a new idea comes, a new business model comes in an industry. The people who were leading the industry at the time almost never are the ones which are leading the new wave. It's always somebody small, a startup, somebody with a new idea without the constraints of the existing organization. So I do think it's organizational structure which stands in the way of making the changes happen, because to me, the biggest problem in making these types of changes happen is that the executives, senior leaders of organizations are motivated by certain performance measures, performance indicators, targets. And those targets are not necessarily targets about making change happen. They're targets about keeping the existing things going and getting measures on those. And so then if I look inside an organization, I have somebody responsible for keeping the costs low. I have somebody else responsible for looking after the human resource, somebody else looking after information technology. And they're all measured on contradictory performance indicators. And so they're all trying to optimize their part. And if it's time for an industry to change and the organization is still measuring itself on the old measures, then there'll be resistance to that change because it will not be consistent with the performance goals of those executives. So I think that if we don't have process management with true accountability for the process, we're going to get people performing according to what their goals are, not what the best goals are for the organization end to end. This lack of goal alignment, to me, is the biggest issue and resistance that we're going to face, because people don't have the motivation or the incentive to drive towards what's best overall. Because it could easily be that for the organization to do better, I should reduce my staff in half and give half of those to somebody else. But if my position is measured by how many staff I have, then I'm not going to have the motivation to do that. So I think that we have to actively manage the process and the outcomes of those processes, and it doesn't happen by accident. I'm not sure I've answered that question, but this is such a lot to unpack.
No, great insight. So if you can please share one of your experience as a case study, where how did you find the need of a business process management in an organization? What challenges did you see? What challenges did you face in an organization in the journey of the BPM? And finally, what value is delivered to the organization?
Okay, and I'm going to pick on one with one organization I've worked with consistently for 20 years. Mm-hmm. This is an organization that manufactures, distribute chocolate products and other types of candy bar products as well. They have other lines of business as well, but I'll focus on the confectionery part of the business. In 2008, I guess it was, they decided, and this is a global organization, they're in 80 different countries. We were dealing with the Canadian operation. We also did the same thing for the Brazilian organization too. But in the Canadian organization, they were given a goal by the corporate office, the global corporate office, and they were told that over the next 5 years, we would like you to double your revenue. And really what they said was, we want you to grow 15% per year. Don't just double at the end, but grow consistently. Grow 15% per year, compounded. Right? So over 5 years, that really you pretty much are doubling. And also, we also want to be able to do is make sure we keep our current level of return on net assets. And on top of that, also, by the way, we want you to generate 4% cash. So grow like crazy, stay profitable, and pay for your own growth. That's really what they were saying. Now, the challenge with this was that 15% growth rate per year was being charged to I would say industry segments or categories of product that naturally was growing at 2% per year. So in other words, we want 15, the industry is going to give you 2. So, okay, now what are we going to have to do? Can we do this? Can we do this by process alone? And clearly, your processes have to get much, much better, but making their current product more attractive would not do it, because the marketplace is not there for it. So what we did with them is we took them through some exercises, and we did look at, say, what are all the processes we have. We laid out a process architecture and so on. But then we said, well, if we optimize this process architecture, can we achieve those goals? We said, well, we can get a certain amount, but not enough. What are we going to have to do? So, well, we're going to have to acquire capacity. Okay. So to acquire capacity, what that meant was we're going to have to basically we're going to have to acquire competitors. We're going to have to buy market share. In order to get the 15% rather than 2, we're going to have to buy the market share. Okay, great. So we have to buy the market share. What else are we going to have to do? Well, we're going to have to bring products to market much sooner than we were doing before. We have to be much more innovative with our products. And so those 2 things became critical success factors, or you could say critical capabilities that the organization had to have. And on their existing process architecture, there was no process that said acquire competitors, acquire and integrate competitors. So we put that into the process architecture. We did some prioritization. We call it pain and gain. What is strategic and what is broken? And the acquire competitors became right to the very top, because they realized that if they didn't do that exceptionally well, they would never achieve the goals. So we had a clear message. We had very motivated management, because the country operation would fail if they did not hit the numbers. But we had to come up with a way of doing acquisitions and integrations. And this is not really a core process for them, but it was an enabling process which constrained everything else. So we basically designed what that was all about, and in all of that, we helped them sort of design what that would be, and also they then went out and identified candidates, and they acquired a couple of other companies in that business, and this is a big global deal they ended up doing, and so they acquired them, integrated them, and 5 years later they met the goal. Now, which was remarkable. The only problem with that is 2 years later they asked them to do it again.
Okay, great.
So because they were ready to do that. So, but the challenges we faced were still with things like our executives rewarded on the right thing. We have to change the motivational structure, the incentive structure for the executive team. That's hard, and there's a lot of resistance with regard to that. There's also a lot of people who didn't know anything than the specialized area that they worked in, even at the executive level. People grow up their whole life in manufacturing a certain type of product, but now we have to change it and have other types of products that they had not worked with before. And so, so getting that type of change, I think it was the change at the senior level that was the hardest, even though they were motivated. Now, in other situations, we've seen it where the people did not have the right incentives, and that's in that case, I think it's going for a massive big change is too much, because you spend all of your time with politics and organizational constraints and resistance, and on top of that, people who don't know how to manage a process end to end. They do not know what it means to be a process owner. They have no idea how to behave in doing process ownership. So even in that other case, we had to educate, train, and coach the executives on how to think beyond their silo. So, so I guess that those types of challenges, I don't think they're process design problems. I think we're smart enough to figure out the process design. I think we can be innovative, but can we get the people to go on the journey? And can we change the culture to being a sharing culture rather than a controlling culture? I think those are the issues that we found be most difficult.
Great, very encouraging story, Roger, I would say. So many organizations we have seen are moving ahead in their journey to implement or adopt process excellence frameworks like Malcolm Baldrige or EFQM. So do you see an organization who's going for process excellence framework, business process management can be a good support to them?
Quite honestly, I don't know how you do Baldrige without process. Because if you look at all the criteria for Baldrige, and EFQM is pretty similar. If you look at the criteria required, so many of them are about having things work in harmony. And so many of them are about having a better measurement system that focuses on results and Again, as long as we're defining quality as being doing what the customer expects you to do, as opposed to just getting rid of defects, not only getting rid of defects, then I think that if you've got a good process framework, you can build your quality improvement around that. And so working towards it a bit at a time, I think it's foundational. I think it's absolutely foundational, because the work is the work. As I said before, external parties don't see inside the box, or they should not be should not be able to see inside our box, because they shouldn't have to see inside our box. And making sure all those interface points are clean, simple, straightforward, means that behind the scenes we have to really do things well. So processes can be measured, processes have goals, processes have results, processes have measures like effectiveness, efficiency, quality, adaptability. These types of attributes are on processes. Those are a lot of the same things that these frameworks are looking for. So I think if you get your process act together, especially a process architecture review, which shows you what all the processes are, fairly high level, what all the processes are and how they interconnect with each other, then we won't have gaps and problems of handoff and delays and extra hidden factory rework, those types of things. A lot of that stuff will go away because we'll design it out, because we'll know how to chunk out the journey, but not do it functionally, but do it cross-functionally. I think they're essential. But as long as you're also talking about frameworks, we're seeing a lot of other frameworks become quite popular. And I know many of them have been around for some time, and you have a background in manufacturing. And so I'm sure you're familiar with the SCORE model, Supply Chain Council model, which is sort of a framework from plan, source, make, deliver, return, as sort of being at top level. But then, having variations about, make to inventory, make to order, engineer to order, like those variations, those models have been there a while. But now we're starting to see a lot of models popping up, which are sort of standard industry models. So for example, I'm doing some work right now in financial services. There's a model called BIAN, which is basically the banking industry model. Again, it's been around for a while, but I'm finding people are starting to use these standard industry models as a starter point for looking at their own organization and saying, have we covered all of this? Where is it happening? How do we put it together in a way that makes sense for us to get a bit of a kickstart? I do believe you cannot just take an industry model and implement it. You have to make it work for you. You have to make sure the language is right, and every organization is different. But we're seeing these types of frameworks popping up now too. So standard models of processes, information, capabilities, much more of a business, broadening process into business architecture, which is where I think a lot of it's going anyway. So there's a lot of help out there, but you still have to think.
So an organization which is having a process management journey, if they would like to know how to measure ROI of business process management, how do you guide them?
Well, I actually have to say this is probably the hardest thing to measure, because you can make the business case, do a formal business case to say we want to do this project and we're going to shorten the time to market from 18 months to 9 months on average. Well, how much is that worth? Well, it may be if you get to market 9 months, or say it's 18 months to 9 months, if you get to market in 9 months rather than 18, how much more market share can you get? And what's it going to cost us? And what is that worth? So if you start to look at outcomes of what you've done, that would be my ideal way to do it. The problem is you cannot prove it. You cannot prove that a process-based approach got you there, because a lot of other people are going to claim the same benefit. So you almost have to do it by proxy to say, you just basically say to the organization, our return on investment from BPM is going to be, we're going to save you 9 months. What is that worth to you? So ask the business, what is it worth to you to do that? What is it worth to you to retain your customers, to reduce the churn of customers? Say, so maybe you're keeping 80% of your customers every year, but if we can keep 90% of the customers every year, how much lifetime value is there in a customer? So we see, I mean, I've seen a number of organizations do this in the past, where they basically say, I've seen pizza companies say, well, if we keep a customer for their whole life, this is what it's worth to us. Or a car manufacturer, if you only buy our car and have all your service done in our dealerships, then this is how much revenue we'll take for you. But if we lose you and we lose you for life, this is how much we've lost. It's those kind of discussions, I think, that we really have to have. And so, but again, as I say, there'll be a lot of other people say, well, yeah, I did that. You know, you say the manufacturer, IT can say, if I produce that system, which enables that process, then I want to take that credit, because they've also made a business case. So I think we have to maybe find some proxy measures somewhere sitting in between. And I think that purely ROI by itself will not do it. We have to have other belief that connecting the dots from end to end is worth it to our organization. And usually it does require someone at the leadership level to sponsor that type of thinking. Now, typically I only need one person like that. I don't need everybody there. We'll get them gradually over the period of time. And at the end of it, when it's successful, they'll all believe it was their idea anyway. So, but that's okay. But hard numbers are hard to find. I apologize for that answer.
No, this is, I completely agree with you, but, and you rightly said, this can be aligned with the business objective, business, the priority, the value to the business, indeed. So one of the challenge that we have seen in an organization from their traditional approach, that organizations are organized vertically. Roles, responsibilities, authorities are defined vertically. Whereas the value that we talk about is generated, the cross-functional processes that we talk about, right? So how do you manage? How do you find this type of challenge can be managed or break down the silos in the organization?
Well, I think, first of all, I'll come back to something I've always believed is a really critical issue, and that is back to the process architecture. It may not be very deep. I mean, and it's not a workflow. It's not like step A, step B, step C. It's things like, it's things like product, for getting a product to market. It's things like launching a new product in market. It's things like that. So, but it doesn't say how we do it. It says what we do. We have to launch the product. But with that process architecture, I can now start to ask the question: who is going to take responsibility for assuring the performance of that particular process? Of course, we just talked about performance. But every process that's well formed can be measured. As I said before, effectiveness, efficiency, quality, adaptability. I can measure that process in terms of how it's going. But I need someone to take responsibility for assuring that. When you're a low mature organization, it's hard to find people who have a reason to do that. Because as I said before, they're measured. Their key performance indicator is up and down, it's not across. So what I've seen is that if we can take the top executives and make sure that we can get those executives to pick up a group of processes, for example, all customer facing, I did this with a phone company one time, all customer facing processes was responsibility of one executive on the executive board. All network infrastructure processes was the responsibility of another one. But they still had their line organization, but they were monitoring performance and fighting for and advocating for improvements in that set of processes. And part of their job was to make sure the message got out to all the regions, because all those same processes are executing in 10 different regions across the country. So they have to sort of keep coordination with the people who are actually doing operations day to day. But at the beginning, it might be a little soft. It just says, pay attention to it, look at the performance, see how it's going. We have a process council where we discuss these things as a set of people who all of whom have responsibility for some processes. But then as we get a bit more mature, what we start to see is not only will they have some responsibility for monitoring, they also then start to take some accountability for performance. Now, if once you can make that leap, then things do change quite dramatically. Now, and I'm not talking about organizations where the processes match the org chart. And in some cases, you can find certain processes that match nicely the org chart, but other ones they pull from so many different expertise areas that you can't possibly do that. For example, I can't build finance into every single one of my processes. I need a financial service to help me with all of them. So maybe we'll never get to be fully process structured, but the people in finance, then, if that's the case, have to appreciate that their success is when the process they're supporting is successful, not when they've done everything that the finance director says. So this was the initial value proposition of BPM, was to get rid of the silos. I don't think we'll ever get rid of them altogether in a lot of industries, but we have to sort of change the measurement, the motivation, and start to share the results across the organization a little bit more. So it does come down to process ownership. We always have layers of all that. We have something we call process stewardship, process ownership, process executive levels. And so the process architecture is covered. Every single process in the process architecture is clear to say who's looking after this on behalf of the organization. But you might have to start small. You might have to find your champions. You might have to put up with a lot of frustration along the way. And you're certainly going to have to educate and coach those executives in looking beyond their own boundaries.
In my different talks with the other legends, there's one important, or I would say different perspective that I heard from the different legends. A few of them recommended business process management is an approach which is bottom-up approach, should be adopted. And few of the legends talked about it is a top-down approach. So as per you, Roger, which approach do you recommend?
Well, I'm going to be very consistent with the other legends from this point of view. Idealistically, I would say it should be top-down, because then we have a structure where you have a clear start, a clear end. You can really determine the quality of that process end to end, and you do that agnostic to the org chart, right? In other words, that hierarchy of processes exists even if you reorganize 20 times. Those processes still have to be performed. So that's why I would say I like to come top down. But in reality, I don't think I've ever seen it happen exactly like that. In reality, you've got people who have responsibilities even for their area, and everybody says do continuous improvement. Okay, so we find bottlenecks, we find queues, we find delays, we find extra work, we find waste. Like this is sort of the lean view of the business. And so there's a lot of activity happening very much at the bottom. The challenge is to not stop them from going ahead, because you can't tell them don't improve and don't do better and don't build process models. All those are really, really good things. The problem is that they're quite often not aligned with the architectural view. So some sort of BPM center of excellence needs to sort of try to match those two things up. And so it's really, really difficult. But there is, I mean, you find you've got this view coming down, you've got these things coming up, and they don't connect very, very well. So somebody has to perform some magic on the models down below to get them to connect into the things above. But I can't expect the people who are doing operational work to not be doing improvements. And so we've actually now make a distinction between process management and process improvement. And we actually, in our own architecture, we build architectures for, so in the own architecture, we actually have a business process management process. We also have a continuous improvement process. We used to have them together, now we've separated them. And the important thing is to get them aligned. How do we actually get them all working together? If you truly want to go and manage the business by processes, you have to come top down. But if you want to continue the organization, you want to make sure that this becomes a capability that everybody has. You can expect to find some things won't fit. They won't have the same naming conventions. They won't have the same structure. The models might even be in different tools, if in any tools. So you need a center of excellence to sort of hold all of this stuff together, in my opinion. And you have to be incredibly patient and forgiving of the fact that not everybody's doing things exactly the way you want. If you're at level 5 maturity, which I don't know of any, well, maybe 1 or 2 organizations in the world. If you're at that level, maybe you don't have these problems, but you've gone through all those problems in order to get there.
Great. Roger, I have my last question for this session. I would like to discuss with you about what are the trends or the changes that you are seeing in the industry regarding business process management. Explicitly for the practitioners like us, where do you recommend us to focus now?
Yeah, I think I don't have a great new shiny ball answer for that. I think it's just to really try to get the dots aligned. Now, one of the things that I'm in, I shouldn't say this now because I could be making a commitment, but anyway, hopefully very soon I'll be able to have my next book out, which is going to be called Collecting, Connecting, and Correcting the Dots. And so the collecting and connecting is very much about business architecture. And so, and there've been these raging debates for the last 10 years about capabilities versus processes. And if we have capabilities, we don't need processes and all those kind of things, and vice versa. You know, which do our processes. I know Roger Burlton believes very much that processes are really the critical issue. I do agree with him on that. But there are people out there now doing business architecture work where they are looking at information. They're looking at capabilities. They are looking at processes. They're calling them value streams rather than processes. And I think that all of those, and also they're looking at things like decisions, business rules, things like microservices in the IT world. Where I'm spending my time right now, and I think where we need to do more of this is, we as process people, we need to be the ones pulling those things together. Because if I change a capability which ends up as an IT microservice, that microservice is going to be used, I'm expecting, for example, things like credit check capability. That credit check capability in a bank is going to be used at least about 8 or 9 or 10 processes. So if I go build that, do I build it for one of those processes or do I build it for all of those processes? I'd like to have one service which enables those processes. And if I have a problem in a process with credit check, and I then go to IT and say, can you fix this? And they fix it for me. Have they messed it up for everybody else? And so this issue of cross connection, this many-to-many relationship, each process has many capabilities. Each capability can serve many processes. How do I get that aligned? So I really do think this is sort of the next place we need to go. I think process architects can be the glue that holds the rest of the business architecture together. The challenge is there's a lot of business architects who came from IT, from an IT experience, and they think the business architecture, or at least the act, as though business architecture is only there to figure out what systems we need, as opposed to looking at how capable is the whole organization. And there are people out there doing data quality. Well, you know what? You're doing data quality. If you have a data quality problem, it means you have a process problem, because the process is creating that data. And if it's not right, then you have something wrong with your process. And And if you have different new policies and new business rules, what are all the places where those rules are applied? Is it only one process, or does it show up in multiple processes? This cross connection between processes and everything else, process holds it together. It holds all these other pieces together. But I think we sort of have to start to influence, work with, and maybe synchronize and coordinate what's happening in the business architecture space. So I recommend all process architects learn a lot more about business architecture as well, because then we can have more influence on what's taking place in the organization.
Wonderful. That's a great session, Roger. Got a really good learnings, understanding, insight about the process management. And indeed, we look forward for your upcoming book and
Yes.
focus more on the business architecture. I'm sure your next book will be as much as appreciated, respected, like the book which is the previously published. Thank you so much for giving us your time. It was a great honor, and I really enjoyed our session. And I'm sure all those who are viewing this talk show would definitely learn a lot, and they will get in touch with you with their more questions, your advices and guidance. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amit. I appreciate talking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you.